Hello, and thank you so much for joining me once again. Today's video is a little bit different, so let me explain. This coming Sunday, July the 19th, we're going to be having a Zoom communion service at 10 o'clock. So really this is just an extension of the short reflection I shall give there, based on Psalm 42. So this is for those of you who can't wait, or it's for those of you who can't get the Zoom recording afterwards, or who can't join us for the service at 10 o'clock. For those and anybody else who wants to take an interest in it. So thank you for joining me. It's great to have your company once again. Now, Psalm 42, the first two verses express a deep longing for God. This is what the psalmist says. As the deer pants for the streams of water, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When can I go and meet with God? What I want us to think about today is some of the longings that we've been having during the last 4 months plus of lockdown. It's especially difficult for Leicester, where they're still quite locked down. And what I've noticed is that over the time, the longings that I've had for particular situations have kind of modulated, changed and evolved a little bit. So to start with, when we couldn't go and see our daughter Hannah and son-in-law Paul and Ella and Finley, their two children, the longing was to be able to talk to them. And we did that, and we actually saw them on FaceTime, which was great. But after 2 or 3 weeks, we began to think, no, we really need to see them face to face. And when eventually we were able to go to Desford, where they live, it was wonderful just to be able to sit in the garden 2 meters apart and talk and relax and enjoy one another's real company. But then as that's progressed, it was no longer quite enough. And so we've come to the stage now where meeting them is great, but what we really long to do is to be able to give them a hug and a cuddle and say farewell properly. We need to be able to not only just see, but to have that physical contact, because that's the kind of beings we are. We are physical beings. And through our bodies, we experience all kinds of things and express all kinds of emotions to one another, and it enriches our lives. I think this psalmist was in lockdown in 3 kinds of ways. As you read through the psalm, you'll discover that he can't go to worship in the temple like he used to do so. Now, whether that's because he'd grown too old or because he was kind of in some kind of exile or even in prison, we don't know. But physically, he was not able to do what he used to do and go where he used to go. He was locked down. But he was also locked down because of the taunts of his enemies. They were challenging his faith. They were confining the riches of his faith in God, because they were saying to him incessantly, where is your God in all this? And maybe you've had that from relatives too, who've said, okay, if there is a God, where is he? Why has he allowed this coronavirus to flourish? Why doesn't he provide us with something to deal with it better than this? People challenge our faith, and that confines us. We don't feel able to express it so fully or to share with them as confidently as we might like. And then I think the third way in which he's locked down is in his own emotion, in his own sense of well-being, because he says of his self, why are you cast down, O my soul? That's his whole being. I think he was going through a time of depression, and that's to be expected during times of lockdown, isn't it? So here is a man who shares our situation. He's locked down. And in the midst of that, he expresses his deep desire for God, as the deer is longing for a drink of water from a free-flowing stream through the desert. So he longs for God. He longs to be with God. And that's a very important thing for us not to give up on, I think. Sometimes we can kind of squash our longings for God. We're too busy, or we've got too many struggles going on, or we've got confusion in our mind, and we allow our longing for God to be pushed to one side. And I want to encourage you not to do that. Express your longing for God as the psalmist did. And if you've lost it, then share that with God and ask him to bring it back to you, because God is faithful. And as he's thinking about the past, remembering what he used to do, as he recalls who God is, so I think his faith comes back to life a little bit, because he says, by day the Lord directs his love, at night his song is with me. He experiences God coming to meet his longing. So don't squash that longing, nurture it and rejoice in it, and tell God exactly how you feel. If you feel down, you can tell God. We can be absolutely honest with God about our state of mind, about the things that oppress us, and about what we long to be able to do. Here was a man who shared his longings with God, and whose chief longing was for God. But we think about our longings not only in the context of this psalmist, but also in the context of Jesus. Because when he instigated the first Lord's Supper, Holy Communion, at that Passover meal, he said to his disciples that he'd eagerly desired to eat this meal with them. He longed for their physical company. He longed to share this solemn act of remembrance when Israel remembered how God had delivered them from Egypt. He longed to share it with other people. Being with other people enriches our experience of God and enables us to recall and celebrate his goodness far more richly. So Jesus too had longings. And it's important that if we are longing for God, we should remember that God is longing to be with us as deeply and as fully and as richly as that is possible. And of course he does that as we take the bread and eat it and remember Jesus. He does that as we take the cup and remember how Jesus allowed his whole life to be poured out so that we could be forgiven and restored to God. As we do those things, share in the sacrament, the powerful sign of God's amazing love for us in Jesus, as we do that, Jesus meets with us. We can't meet with one another yet. We pray and long for that to happen because it will enrich our Christian lives. But for now, let's be content to nurture our longing for God as the psalmist did, to share it with him, but also to remember that he longs to meet with us, whether it's on Sunday, at the Zoom communion, as we walk through a wood, as we talk with friends, as we read the Bible, as we pray. Be aware that just as you might long for God like a deer, a thirsty deer longs for a stream of cool and life-giving water, so God is longing to meet with you as well.